Hi, Big Dreamers. It's Eva Cartman, the host of the Dream Big podcast show. In this week's episode, which is episode 154 of the Dream Big podcast, I'm going to talk about something that I've never talked about on the Dream Big podcast show before. Death. A man I greatly admired, Stephenson, who is a guest on the podcast, recently passed away. His passing really moved me and my family, as he was someone we regarded as a hero. While those who loved Sean were devastated to learn this tragic news, I wanted to share how his memory and legacy will never be forgotten. In tribute to Sean, we are not going to play the usual upbeat segue song, and I will jump right into this week's content. First off, for those of you who don't know who Sean Stephenson is, let me first tell you a bit about him. Sean was born on May 5th, 1979. He was born with a condition called osteogenesis imperfecta, causing him to have fragile bones that break very easily. Doctors at the Chicago Children's Hospital thought he would die within 24 to 48 hours after birth, but Sean was a fighter. By the time he was 18 years old, Sean had suffered more than 200 fractures in all parts of his body. Something as simple as sneezing would fracture his ribs. Putting on pants too quickly could break his legs. The condition also stunted Sean's growth, and as a result, Sean stood 3 feet tall and lived his life in a wheelchair. Sean became affectionately known as the 3-foot giant, because despite all the medical challenges he has faced over his life, he made the decision to lead an extraordinary life. In the process, he inspired millions worldwide, including Sir Richard Branson, President Clinton, Tony Robbins, and the Dalai Lama. He was also a great inspiration to me and my family. We are at episode 154 right now, and very early on before this podcast had a big reach and millions of downloads, Sean agreed to be a guest on the podcast, which was published as episode 32. I'll include the links in my show notes, and please go back and listen to that episode at dreambigpodcast.com/32. Before the interview, my parents and I watched his videos on YouTube and on his website, like we always do to prepare questions for our guests. We were so drawn to his story and, more importantly, the empowering decisions he made about his life. And I know that is why millions of people adored him and considered him to be a mentor. He was 3 foot tall, in a wheelchair, in consistent danger of injuring his fragile body, yet he was the most positive, the most fun, the most alive person you'll ever see. While this podcast is normally about happy subjects, I felt obligated to say something about Sean's death because he was so influential in my life and to my family. The title of this episode is What to Do When Your Hero Dies. And the same advice can apply for anyone you admire, care about, or love. The first step is to keep on talking about them. Sean may have passed away, but his teachings, his videos, his articles, his books, his message can live on with us and those who he impacted. You can honor your hero's memory by keeping their memory alive. That's one of the reasons why we are doing this podcast. By sharing our feelings about Sean, hopefully at least one of you, and I'm sure many more, will go back and listen to my interview with Sean, will go explore his other content online, and will be inspired by his message, even though he cannot deliver it to you in person anymore. The second and most important step to honoring Sean's legacy is actually taking what you learned from Sean and making it part of your life. That way, in a sense, Sean does live on inside of you. I learned a ton from Sean, but I wanted to share one particular story he shared with me on the podcast that was very impactful. Sean shared that when he was a kid at Halloween one year, he was in a costume on the floor getting excited to go trick-or-treating. It was the one day of the year when all kids dressed up and he felt like he fit in. He caught his leg on the door and it bent back and snapped at the femur, breaking his leg. He was so sad and angry that instead of being able to go trick-or-treating, he needed to go to the hospital for yet another bone break. It was then that his mom asked him if he was going to let his condition be a gift or a burden. Fortunately, for millions that he inspired, he chose to make his condition a gift. Given how much pain he was in, all of his challenges, the fact that he could not have a quote normal life, He could not walk. He could not run. Sean could have easily decided to hate his life, to be depressed, to not do anything but be sad about his condition. He did just the opposite. He took those challenges and saw it as a gift, so he was able to inspire others who had challenges, who were in pain, who were going through tough times. That there was a way to be an optimist, to find purpose, and to make a difference. My parents and I often remind each other of Sean's unshakable optimism whenever we start to get down, or we want to complain, or say something is unfair. It's a decision. It's a choice. Every time when I'm faced with a challenge and I choose to see it as a gift rather than a burden, then I am honoring Sean's legacy and ensuring that his impact lives on beyond his death. I called Sean a hero of mine. He was not a hero with a cape. Far from it, he lived in a wheelchair. But the doctors told Sean's parents at birth that he would live 24 to 48 hours. He lived 40 years. The fact that he defied those odds and lived such an extraordinary life for that long is heroic. And he is a hero I will never forget. I also wanted to acknowledge Sean's amazing wife, Mindy. Mindy was also a guest on the Dream Big podcast, and I know she is heartbroken right now. Please send her your love and prayers. A GoFundMe has also been established to help support Mindy, and we will include the link in our show notes. Thank you all for listening to this episode, and feel free to point your friends and family to dreambigpodcast.com/154 if you were moved by this episode. I hope you do not experience the passing of someone you admire anytime soon. But when you do, remember to keep on talking about them, their impact on your life, share what you learned with others, and honor their legacy by living their teachings. As always, thank you so much for tuning in to the Dream Big podcast. This is Eva Cartman reminding you that you have unlimited potential. Your dreams are not optional, you need to make them essential. So take massive action and turn those big dreams into reality. Live with passion, the way life was meant to be. I'll see you in the next episode.